I think if I can open, and maybe just to pick on Louis there sitting in the audience, or even Linda, whom I know are in the large audit committees, and probably Linda is the chair of the audit committee, 3 audit committees of the listed companies. Have you seen, what is your view around this matter where now the responsibility has been put squarely on the FD?
There you go. Thank you, Cindy. And I will look to Louis and hand the mic to him. I'm sure he'll have views on it as well. Maybe just firstly agreeing with Tanya that clearly the intention of that requirement, or I think it would be unfortunate if the outflow of that listing requirement is that CEOs get sidelined or that FDs now feel that all the responsibility lie on their shoulders. For me, the way in which I see the intention of the requirement is really to make sure from an audit committee perspective that our first layer of defense, which is management and which is the strength of the financial function, that function is working appropriately. And the reality is in King 3 we say that the audit committee should once a year at least assess the finance function. If there's a problem in a finance function, a good audit committee will identify it whenever it happens and hopefully deal with it and try to strengthen that. Because as audit committee members, we're very exposed if we don't have a strong finance function. I think the fact that there's that specific duty on the audit, on the FD, or that specific pointed to the FD under the listings requirements doesn't really take any responsibility away from the CEO. So whether he chooses to go to an audit committee meeting or not, it still doesn't dissolve any responsibility. He still carries the can with the FD. I must say, in my experience, the audit committees that I have been involved in over the years, I've never really seen that the FD now takes a complete back step and is not involved. I think primarily it is still the CEO, the FD is still quite sort of at the forefront, but I've certainly always seen the CEO taking a very keen interest in the activities of the audit committee, and I am going to give it to Louis to earn his lunch.
No, I must say I tend to agree that I think with the CEO to a large extent being a member of the board as well, and with the importance of the 2 statutory committees of audit and social and ethics, I'm not really familiar with any of those committees where the CEO is not attending. It might well be that the FD plays a more active role at the audit committee, but surely the CEO is an active participant, and if not, I think it needs attention.
Sure. It's good to hear a view from other audit committees, because I have observed it in one listed company in particular. Can we open, if there are any questions from the floor, to either Zolisa or Tanya? I am noting you from the Gauteng province, but let me take a new face. Thank you.
Thank you. The presentation made by Zolisa made an alarming, which I think maybe we need to relook at it. The appointment of the AC members by the accounting office is a contravention of the King Code completely, because the accounting officer is not independent enough to make such a decision. I think maybe through the revised regulations, it needs to be reconsidered, because you cannot be a player and a ref, because the accounting officer is the implementer in terms of policies and all that, and is appointing an oversight body that looks after the oversight responsibilities. I think it's something that Treasury has to look at it, which is different from the MFMA side, because if you look at the PFMA, it gives the mandate to the accounting office, while in the MFMA, it is the councillors who appoint the members. For example, if you look at the COJ, there's a group governance, which is an independent body that looks after the appointment processes. But if I'm the MD, not MD, accounting officer, which is the DG at a department, I appoint my members of the audit committee. I do not see the need for the audit committee in that environment. I think it's something that Treasury has to look at it because it doesn't fulfill any responsibility at all.
Okay, let's take one. There was another question at the back, the lady just behind you.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me? Can you hear me? Oh, thank you. I'm Nosipo from KZN. My question is to Zoliso. From a public setup point of view, especially in respect of audit committees that serve on local government, where you find that there is still challenges in terms of capacity or level of capacity at council level, and to some extent at management level, in terms of financial management and other governance roles and responsibilities. So you often find that as an audit committee member, your role sort of stretches from just being oversight because of the capacity to more of a hand-holding, especially when it comes to governance issues, bordering on operational at some stage. I just wanted to hear Treasury's view in terms of that. Thank you.
Okay, let's take a third question. The gentleman here with the navy jacket.
Thank you. My question will be directed to Zoliso. In your presentation, you have mentioned, oh, by the way, my name is Emmanuel. You have mentioned various challenges that are affecting audit committees within the entities. And I've seen that you have also mentioned that there's an audit committee handbook. I'm not sure if the handbook is oriented towards Treasury, National Treasury as a department, or it's a public sector which will cut across all the departments. You have mentioned a few challenges like non-participation or disengagement by EXCO, the handover from outgoing audit committee to the incoming audit committee. So my question is that I'm not sure if in your handbook it has tried to cover all those challenges, because if you are saying EXCO is not participation, for example, let me tell you, there's a document, there's an article that has been written which proves that EXCO oversight structures have failed, in particular in relation to Limpopo Treasury being under Section 100. EXCO has failed to do its oversight work. SCOPE has failed to do its oversight work. More importantly, National Treasury has also failed to do its oversight work, much as Provincial Treasury was supposed to exercise its Section 18 of the PFMA more effectively, but the oversight structures had a critical role to play to ensure that that department also. So what I'm saying is that all those challenges that you have mentioned there, a special disengagement of EXCO, because if audit committees are doing that, this and that, their work ends at the accounting officer who sat with them in the meeting. You can't see the effectiveness there. So what are you doing in terms of all those issues, including the handbook that you have produced? Thanks.
Okay, let's take one last question. Hopefully it's going to be a private sector one. Okay, brilliant. Thanks.
Thank you. My name is Colin. It's a question for Tanya. It's just basically around the fact that the chairperson of the board might be given membership of the audit committee. I think maybe it's a good presentation that you've done, and also the principle of either you explain or you comply. But for me, there might be an issue of the audit committee is seen as a statutory body, and it's usually creates a two-tier board where there's healthy tension between the chair of the board and the chair of the audit committee. But by making the chair of the board a member of the audit committee, it might then make the status or reduce the status of the audit committee as a statutory body to a subcommittee of the board, to the extent that there might be all sorts of problems, because one, the chairperson then participates on the level of the audit committee on critical issues which might affect the board, and then he is then also seen as a referee and a player to the extent that he now goes back and he puts his head on as a chairman of the board and he tackles the same issues again. So that's the first point. The second point is where there might also be a problem of a conflict of roles, in the sense that the chairperson of the board can try to influence at the level of the audit committee issues which might serve before the board, to the extent that possible from a public sector point of view, investigations that the audit committee wants to extend into issues that affects the board. And there's all sorts of other issues, and maybe from a King perspective.
Sorry, can we please just keep it at just those two questions?
Yes, it's just a comment that I wanted to make on the King issue of the comply principle.
Okay, maybe just from a timing point of view, let's not make a comment. Let's just give the panel then an opportunity to answer. So Lisa, you've got 3 questions, and probably if you can tackle all 3 at once, and then Tanya to tackle the 2 from the gentleman. Thank you. Okay.
Right. With the new Treasury regulations, we have changed that. We have, I would agree, there is a gap in having the same accounting officer appointing his own audit committee members. And I would say maybe the PFMA, when it was written the first time around, the expectation would be that the accounting officer would appoint these people to assist him, and therefore would appoint people really duly qualified and, you know, robust enough to keep him on his toes and, you know, keep him accountable. But obviously we know the experience is telling us otherwise. So we have proposed that the executive authority appoint audit committee members going forward with these new Treasury regulations that are being revised. So I hope that, you know, we can see the effects of that. Then the second question around the audit committee being stretched in terms of capacity to maybe do the work of council as well, if I understand your question correctly. I do know there's lots of interventions from various angles, like for instance your SALGAs, your COCTAs try to train councillors, you know, every now and then in terms of what their responsibilities really are and what their role, you know, towards the audit committee is and should be. So, you know, maybe we should just keep working on those. I mean, I don't know if maybe shifting the blame to the audit committee, it will not work. Council obviously has got a very specific role. Audit committee has got a very specific role as well as MPACs for those provinces that have implemented MPACs. And thirdly, around, you know, whether oversight has failed, you know, with these things that keep cropping up, or Treasury has failed, or provincial Treasury, or with the accounting officer not even participating in these meetings. Again, you know, we get the question, shall we put everything into legislation? Shall we regulate everything? Some people feel we over-regulating already. I mean, you know, shall we put in the PFMA or the regulations, the accounting officer shall be in each and every meeting, or out of 3 of the 4 meetings regulated per year, the accounting officer shall be there. So some of these things, it's a, you know, we need to, you know, address it at the root and not say, oh, Treasury is not doing its job well, or the audit committee. I mean, you can't really, I don't know what more you can do if maybe your accounting officer keeps delegating that responsibility to his senior managers and so on. So, but I would not say that oversight is failing, and also I would just caution against over-regulating or trying to regulate everything to make people do what they need to be doing anyway.
Okay, thank you. Tanya? the two questions from the back.
So as I understand the question or the concern that was raised as to the reasons why specifically King highlights, or why King has it as a preferred requirement that the chairman doesn't serve, or the chairman of the board doesn't serve on the audit committee, and those are all very valid reasons that I think have been highlighted there. And it was for that reason specifically that when we started down this path, our intention was that we wanted to stick strictly with the wording of King. Having said that, as we engaged with various companies and saw their detailed motivation from a business perspective, why it made sense for them, for the chairman, to still be a member of the board, as I said to you, we believed that it was appropriate to allow companies to have that as an option. Remembering the safety checks, so the chairman of the board cannot be the chairman of the audit committee, that there are at least 2 other independent non-exec board members. So this is not just the chairman sort of having his own debate with himself. There is a proper operational committee. And most importantly, that it is explicitly highlighted to shareholders so that they are aware of the potential risks, but they believe and accept that it is the most appropriate way for the company to go. So we believe that there are sufficient checks and balances, and it's not the norm. I must say that it's majority of the companies will not have the chairman on the audit committee, but there are instances where it makes business sense for them to do that. And then if shareholders believe that is appropriate, we didn't believe that it was appropriate that we should interfere in that process.
Okay, thank you very much. Thanks, everybody. Apologies to those whose questions we didn't take, but our time is up. I'd like to thank you, Tanya and Zolisa.